So what I want to do for the audience is I want to start with just a little bit of context. Can you give me just a few minutes on the path that led you to becoming a restaurateur?
Oh, yes. So I'm third generation in the business. It started with my grandfather as a young 14-year-old who was the son of a stonemason who said that he was going to have none of that, who eventually ends up playing a huge role in the culinary world of Lebanon, in bringing in Austrian pastry chefs to teach the Lebanese how to make pastries, because back then we were just coming out of the Ottoman Empire and everything was clotted cream, fried dough, and simple syrup with rose water and orange blossom. So he did an amazing job doing that, and on his way there, he was a butcher and so on and so forth. He ended up owning this amazing um, catering store with a patisserie, a ice cream store, a chocolate store, all of it, in downtown Beirut in the heydays. Subsequently, we end up in the hotel business. I'm shortening the story because it could take hours and hours. And I end up becoming a refugee in one of these hotels, that hotel, actually, the last hotel that we ended up owning. And I'm 4 years old, and I'm in a very nasty neighborhood, bombs being lobbed, terrorists, militiamen, coming in and out of the place. But really, me as a kid, and kids are very resourceful, I end up creating my own Disneyland, which was the kitchen and the maintenance department of the hotel. And I had a blast. I had food on demand. I had breaking things and putting them back together on demand. So I was loving every minute of it. And I was absorbing all of that, not knowing that I would end up using it at a later stage in my life. And in 1981, so we're talking almost 7 years after the war had started, we move into an apartment and I go food shopping for the first time in my life. I go to a supermarket because I had lived in a hotel. So I was eating with the employees. I was eating staff meal. I loved staff meal. I loved sitting around the table with all the staff and hearing the chef speak and, the reverence that the chef was getting and the front of house and the back of house and the banter and all that. I was watching all of that since I was, with my diapers on. We go to the supermarket and we come home and we make one of those ready-made cakes. And I tell my mom, I'm like, what the hell is this? This is not going to work. I'm eating freshly baked cakes and croissants and making, bread and creme pâtissière on demand and grabbing ice cream that's coming out of the ice cream maker. And you want me to eat this? This is not going to work. So I pick up the phone and I call the chef and I said, Chef, I need to make this dish. Can I have the recipe? And I get the recipe and I start cooking at that age. And I got the bug by, I dialed in a flourless chocolate cake with a bit of cognac that I used to make and bring up to, we used to go to the mountains on the weekend. So I would make 5 cakes and distribute them to all my parents' friends and all that. And I did that. I was 10, 11 years old. I landed in the United States as an accidental tourist at the age of 14 to visit an uncle that I had never met in Colorado and an aunt that lived in Westchester County. And my parents had told me, oh, go to America, see if you like it. And, if you don't like it, you come back to Lebanon. And little did I know that they had planned my exit out of the country. And while I was here, they tell me, you cannot go back to Lebanon. You have to stay in the United States. So clearly it's a, massive shock. I'm 14 years old. I'm without my parents. Okay, I'm with relatives. I'm without the hotel and the hotel's kitchen. So, I'm having a very hard time eating the food that I grew up with. And so I start, I'm watching Julia Childs on PBS and Yang Can Cook and Jacques Pepin and all of that stuff. And I said, okay, I start messing around and cooking here and there. Fast forward to getting to Cornell University, and I'm in a food cost class, and I get the recipe card. And it was like as if the skies parted and heaven descended, and the Almighty came through, because when I saw the recipe card, I realized that I had a framework by which I could perfect my craft. And I knew that version 1, version 2, version 100, if I put my head to it, eventually I was going to be able to replicate the flavors that I grew up with. And that's really where the food side took precedent, and moved even faster. And I started writing things. While I was at Cornell, and before I went to Cornell, my father got killed. We lost the hotel in Lebanon. And I used to cook all the time, after hours and what have you. I was the cook of the group. I was the cook that cooked for everybody and all that. I found myself at Cornell, and I realized hotels were not going to be the thing for me. And there was this Lebanese restaurant on campus, and the food was really not there. So I would go and beg the owner to do the right thing and serve the right food, and not say, well, these are Americans and they don't know the difference, and who cares if we're using fake lemon, and who cares if we're using canned chickpeas for the hummus, and who cares. So I implored this person, and I even, believe it or not, tried to put a group together to invest in this restaurant so that I could improve the food. So it started at that time. We're talking 20 years old. And that's when I decided that I was going to move back to New York City and open a Lebanese restaurant, while in parallel learning the craft of running the business. I went to Lebanon. I did multiple trainings, honed my skills on the food side. I wanted to validate that my flavor profile was correct. Of course, I had all the family recipes that I kind of boot camped myself on. And when I read Malcolm Gladwell's book, 10,000 Hours,
Sure.
when he talks about the 10,000 hours, I realized that, okay, I've been preparing all my life for this moment. And it's time that, I open up a Lebanese restaurant in New York City and show New Yorkers that this cuisine really belongs next to all the other cuisines of the world. And it's not just street food, and it's not just canned chickpeas that are pureed in a food processor. And that's where we are. That's the short version.
Well,
So
but I would I would ask you, you mentioned like learning the business of the business.
yes.
Being the best chef in the world certainly doesn't qualify anyone to be a business owner. And I would argue that there are many chefs out there that have achieved massive acclaim that can't sustain a business for any length of time. And you've lasted, Philippe, for quite some time now, right? And you've managed to grow. So talk to me about your education around the business of the business. Who did you learn from? How
So
did you learn it?
so we as a family uh, engendered hospitality at a very deep level, both to our employees and our guests. It was always my grandfather's way, it was my father's way, and it was my way. There is never a no. We can't do this. We bend over backwards to do what we can, and you have to have a very deep commitment to consistency if you want to succeed. Being a successful businessman in our industry is about consistency. It's about apathy. It's about being hospitable to your staff and being hospitable to your guests. I had a minor in finance as well, so I was a geek. I loved coding. So I'm not your typical guy, and I wrote a bank account program with basic language back in the day, that my uncle, who is one of the founders of the disk drive industry, had taught me. He's like, here, you need to learn this because it's going to be important in your life. Little did I know that it set me up on this path to technology and all that. Everything we do in our company is about systemization and consistency, and really taking every line in the P&L and giving it its own system of management. The moment you're able to do that is the moment that you succeed. If you don't have a starting point, a midpoint, and an end point for each line in your P&L, you're never going to be able to be successful. And anything that represents more than 5% or more than 3% of your P&L should have a system to manage it by. And that's what allows you to have fiscal discipline, fiscal health, that allows you to make the other mistakes that you're going to make, right? And spend as much time as you want in the kitchen and screw up as many times as you can to hone your craft. Unfortunately, you know, in our industry, many of us underestimate the complexity of operating the business.
For sure.
And I've always said I'll hire a restaurateur to go into any other industry, but I'll never hire somebody from another industry to work as a restaurateur,
Sure.
because we are multidisciplinarians and we are masters of the pivot, and we're really, you know, I mean, juggling so many different balls at the same time, and it takes a certain type of back and shoulders to do that. It's not made for everyone.
I think you bring up a really interesting point and a really interesting worldview. You started by saying, I was like, how do you master the business of the business? And you started with consistency and hospitality, which again, those things are great. And on the front end, I think a lot of people have that. But what I think you were actually talking about is the consistency that comes from the focus and discipline of like managing your business, understanding what the numbers are, not overspending your means, right? Building the restaurant that can sustain itself. Because that is what I really think differentiates like the people that are successful. This was very much my life and my career was that, we were broke and massively in debt to the point where eventually we were able to unbury ourselves. But the biggest hurdle for me was the difference between like external success and internal success. It was that like once I had paid off all of the debt, the company had ballooned in size, as did the menu. And so now I've got this thing that managed to get me to zero, but I couldn't keep a dollar. And so everyone in my peer group was like, how do you do this amazing thing? And I'm like, can I borrow $5? Um, because there's a huge difference between, I think, the aspirational public facing success, which is a busy restaurant every night of the week and all of the accolades, and a truly successful business. Over the years, I would imagine, Philippe, because it's been so many years for you, the fundamentals have changed. Occupancy in New York and DC is through the roof. Hourly wage went from when you started, it was a nickel an hour, and now it's $800 an hour. The fundamentals of the business have changed dramatically, right? And so, how
It's
has
very
your
hostile.
business, it is, how has your
It's
perspective on the business of the business evolved over the last 2 decades?
Listen, I'll be honest with you. It breaks my heart to see where we are, and I have to say it. Many of the new talent that's coming into the market has it so much harder than we do, because literally you're getting out of the gate with a knife on your throat, and
For sure.
God forbid you make the slightest mistake, you're out. Listen, I mean, we issue P&Ls every Tuesday. We have visibility instantly. We look at every data point nonstop. Again, I was very blessed by having a data approach to things and looking at spreadsheets and making sure that we did not keep our eye off the ball. The moment a cost went up, we decided, okay, do we keep this recipe? Do we not keep this recipe? Do we shrink the portion? Do we substitute the protein? And you have to be on top of that. It's great to create new dishes every day, but if you're not making money and you're selling the house, what's the point? So you have to balance out your creative instincts with the discipline of running the business to make sure that you have this perfect harmony for the guest. And the guest doesn't see any of these struggles that you're having. All they're seeing is the final show, and they're loving it, and they're coming into your dining room and they're like, oh, Philippe is doing so. They don't know that I'm working 17 hours a day and that I'm working, 7.5 days a week, and so on and so forth. I mean, you have to be a bit of a masochist to be in our industry. I mean,
Sure.
nobody in their right mind would put themselves through that. When I look at the effort to reward ratio, the amount of work we do versus an investment banker or somebody else, we're
Sure.
definitely, we're at the bottom of the barrel. There's no question about it. But there is such a joy in seeing we're instant gratification junkies because we love seeing guests enjoying the fruits of our labor, and we love seeing those heads nodding when we introduce a new dish in the dining room. And I go hide to see how people are reacting. Are they nodding? Are they saying, oh wow, this is really good and all that? Because we want to see that. So uh, I I don't have the secret sauce. All I can tell you is consistency. Look at your P&L, look at your labor costs, make sure that you're always trying to reinvent yourself. I mean, listen, I'll give you an example. We're at version 11 of our hummus recipe. Not because I'm crazy and not because I'm not unsatisfiable. It's because I wake up every so often and I say, oh, wow, I think I have a better way of doing this. Let me think about it. So, and that's the approach we take to everything. If there's a way to do things better, then we need to do it every year. And this is what got us to, we've served almost 2.5 million people in our nomad location, which is almost half the size of Lebanon if you think about it. But that's why I think that's innovating, reinventing, consistency, fiscal responsibility are very important. And listen, as difficult as it is, I'm very excited for our new colleagues and the young talent that's entering the market because they have AI now. So hopefully they'll be able to leverage some of their weaknesses or their inability to, let's say, have the team or the financial wherewithal to pump out P&Ls and all that. Because now, you throw your QuickBook program into an AI, and all of a sudden it can give you a Fortune 500 statement, financial statement with a balance sheet and a cash flow statement. So hopefully AI will be the great leveler and the great assistant, the big brother that helps a lot of this young talent stay healthy and stay stable. And hopefully, if I want to be positive, we'll see a drop in failure rates because AI will be the great equalizer. So
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I am very bullish on AI. We use it a lot. And the reason is I think it can get you much closer to your guests. I think you can make much better educated guesses. I also see that in the coming years, potentially, the cost of goods is going to go down as a result of AI. I think that headcount and labor is going to go down dramatically as a result of AI. Not to say that there are robots in the kitchen, but just that we are more efficiently able to manage the flow of our restaurant through that visibility, able to take care of people better in real time. So I am very bullish on that. I want to talk about focus and I want to talk about niche. One of the things that you had said was, you wanted to go to New York and you wanted to open a Lebanese restaurant. And if we think back to that time, so like there are Lebanese restaurants everywhere now. And Lebanese fine dining is a thing. But it certainly wasn't when you started. Uh, that was not a thing. People weren't rioting in the streets going, I want a Lebanese restaurant. Um, by and large, the only real iteration you saw of this was Mediterranean, right? A blending of multiple cultures. And so, you can look at safety through one of two lenses, right? I'm going to do what everyone else does because obviously like there is some pattern of success there, which for you would have been going Mediterranean. But you chose to go Lebanese, you chose to go authentic Lebanese in an area where it's not like the world was begging for it. You were trying, it's that Henry Ford thing, right? If I did what people asked for, I would have made a faster horse. Um,
yeah.
and so understanding that that's the case. Number one, how were what level of certainty did you go into it with product market fit? And then number two, how did you resist the urge, or I guess the fear associated with like simplifying, softening the brand, making it more widely accessible?
Very, very good question. And it was a risk. When I opened that restaurant, I was almost $7 million in debt. It was November of 2007, and the financial crisis was in evolution.
Yes.
And full on in 2008, 2009, and 2010. So we treaded water for the first couple of years. And I was criticized by the media that who the hell am I to think that I can come and open a Lebanese restaurant that's 10,000 square feet in New York City, out of all cities. And mind you, it's one of the largest Lebanese restaurants in the world outside of Lebanon at the time, right? My game and my risk, my calculated risk was that if I wanted to change the conversation and create a pivot in the cuisine, I needed to do something very grand. And only in New York City can you do that. I had two paths I could go. I can go and open the 100-seater and become a slave and work myself to death and maybe do the same amount of revenue, but have it like, oh, chouchou chez Philippe, whatever. Or I can say I want to be, the Balthazar equivalent of Lebanese cuisine. I want to go big because I had seen the success of the big restaurants, and I knew that if I wanted to eventually extract myself of the business, I needed something that was big, where I had a big team, and it wasn't all dependent on me. It wasn't going to be we're going chez Philippe, we're going to Ilili. So that was one of the guiding principles, if you want, that we use in opening the restaurant. The second one was that I really believed the food tasted better in its authentic form. I mean, and I'm like, I can reproduce this food blindfolded. So why am I not going to gift it to New York City? And why am I not going to train the next, generation of American chefs that are expert in Lebanese cuisine? Like, what the hell? This is not like some secret. We're not talking about, CIA level secrets here. We're talking about food and passion and sharing and creating this beautiful ecosystem. And when I opened the restaurant, gosh, it was me and 80 Americans. There were no ethnic cooks. There was no Lebanese in there doing this or doing that. And at the time, my 80 colleagues and teammates had never served or eaten this food in the form that we were doing it. So it was like really one big mess and a lot of work. I was working from 9 a.m. till 2 a.m.
Sure.
every day, and the triple espresso with two shots, two pills of olive to maintain the course. But the point was that if we serve the food with authenticity, all the Lebanese and Lebanese American crowd, the same way that when you go to a Japanese restaurant and you know that it's frequented by Japanese guests, you know that it's the real deal. I bet on the fact that those Lebanese and American Lebanese will help carry the authenticity, if you want, path really well, because there was nothing like what we were planning on doing. And those guys would be so proud that they were going to bring their American friends. So I would have a sort of Ilili ambassadors, all over the city, whether it's somebody working at JP Morgan or somebody working in the fashion district or a doctor at New York Presbyterian or whatever. There is a large community of Lebanese and people of Lebanese descent that migrated here, back in the 1800s as well. So there's and mind you, all of these immigrants and who are now, as American as apple pie, never lost their connection to their grandmother's grape leaf or the hummus or the baba ganoush or the tabbouleh that their aunt made or whatever. So I bet on those guys. I said to myself, if I give them the real deal, first of all, they're going to be blown away because finally they can eat it. And second, they're going to want to introduce it to all their colleagues. And that was the bet that we made. And it worked. And it worked also because the food is good. I mean, listen,
Sure.
if the food was not good, it wouldn't have worked. Mind you, every job I had in New York City at the time, from 94 to 2007 when I opened the restaurant, I tried to convince the restaurant group I had worked for to open a Lebanese restaurant. I begged them. I told them, let me do it with you. I can, because I was so afraid,
Sure.
I'm not going to lie to you. The CEO I am today is not the CEO, the chef that opened the restaurant in
Sure.
2007. when you have $7 million in debt and you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders and you have responsibility, every mistake becomes,
Absolutely.
ginormous, and you don't have the tools in your belt to know how to deal with it. And you lash and you bitch and you moan and you scream and whatever. It took me 8 years to pivot from a leader that was petrified of losing to a leader that could now go on the offense and think about winning. And it
Yeah.
takes a lot to have that pivot in your head, to start thinking that way.
For me, I had to rock bottom. I owned a bar in Hollywood and 900 square feet, did well over a million into a million and a half, almost $2 million a year. It cranked, right? And it was just magic in
Nice.
a bottle. I wish no one ever experiences that, because a lot of issues come from it. When you have such a big win out the gate, and I was young, I was like 30 years old. I was like, I can do anything, right?
Anything.
Anything, right? Everything I touch turns to gold. So I went from a 900 square foot bar that cranked to a 6,000 square foot, 2-story fine dining restaurant, having never worked in a restaurant before in my entire life. And I managed in a very similar way. I wasn't even a leader, right? I was just a manager, just trying to control chaos. In a year of owning the fine dining restaurant, we were about a quarter million. I mean, forgetting the $2 million we spent to build it out, I lost like $250,000 year one, and I'm broke. I'm like broke. I take the last like 30 grand that I have in my bank account, and then I took out a cash advance from Amex for $50,000 because there was no personal guarantee attached to it. I was like, fuck it, let's go. Um, but that for me, like, that was rock bottom. And that's when I decided, like, I'm going to build the restaurant I want to build, right? Like, we're going to do things the right way. We're not going to focus on anything other than absolute excellence. I'm going to bring in the right people. I'm going to treat people the way I wanted, because like I couldn't even recognize myself in the mirror. But I'm millions of dollars in debt, in every day. All I would do is fucking apologize to people. I'm so sorry that you just gave me $120. I know it was money poorly spent. So I got great people in place, right? Made it an extension of self, and spent every penny of that 80 grand in about 8 weeks. But that's what turned it around for me. And it was and I think you bring up like such an incredible point, which is, the day before you open the restaurant, you have all of this hope, all of this optimism, and you're running towards something amazing. And like, sure as shit, 48 hours after you open, right? It's about nothing other than the avoidance of pain. You are motivated exclusively by fear, and it's about the avoidance of pain. But to your point, the paradigm shift is when you start running towards something again with optimism, right? With that
Exactly.
authenticity. But that was not a natural thing. I mean, I got there through, there was literally nothing else to lose. Um, how did you adjust the culture once you had made that internal switch?
Oof. Immediately, the 65, 70-hour week gone. That was the first thing I did in 2017, 18. I instituted that. And then it was, you know, immediately that created a big shift. Family meal went from, the basics to the full-on, most amazing buffet, you know, A to Z. It was all about giving back, giving back because I'm no longer in the rat race. I've returned the money. I'm not suffocated, and I can be as generous to everybody as they were to the company. And that was a beautiful moment, really. And I cherish that. And I wish I knew that there was this other Philippe that was going to bloom in the beginning, because I would have rather started that way and
Sure.
not have all those fears and all those, anxiety attacks and what have you. So that was, yeah, that was a no-brainer. It was all staff focused, and we're still working on doing things. Whether we're a small company, we have 3 restaurants, and we're planning on bringing in a 401k plan. But we have a very robust pro staff posture because I really believe that the staff and the guests are your guests. It's very simple.
For
It's not
sure.
nuclear science. You know, you have two guests. You have to make both of them happy when you're an owner. Simple as that. You figure out how to do that, you got money in the bank. You don't figure out how to do that, you're going to lose all the money. It's pure and simple. But
I
it
want to talk
helps
about.
also to go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go.
No, I mean it helps also to have a concept that has its niche and is revered and it's still growing. I mean, you know, Nomad, even though it's on its 19-year marching towards its 19-year anniversary, is still breaking records. You know,
Right.
and that's unheard of. So we're very blessed. I don't want to underestimate how difficult things are, right? So I want to make sure that people don't, you know, take how hard everything is for
I want
granted.
to talk about the dip. So there was this book I read by Seth Godin, who I absolutely love. He's this prolific marketer, and he has this book called The Dip. And what the dip is about is it's about like in the life cycle of any business. Typically, like when you're starting out, it gets worse before it gets better. And so, you know, the way that he explains it is what he's trying to do is articulate throughout the course of this book, which is like a 2 hour read. Like, are you in the dip? Right? Are you swimming through the shit? Right? And there's like this oasis on the other side. Or is this just as good as it gets? Right?
Gonna
And
get,
he provides a framework for that. And so, like, you look at your like 20-year entrepreneurial career, right? And you ate shit for the first 2 or 3 years. There were economic, this and that. Um, and so people say, oh, well, I mean, like that doesn't seem that bad. But you know, when you're a year and a half into that 3 year grind and you don't know that it's a 3 year grind, right? It makes it really hard to know whether like the goal it should be to just keep going, right? Focus on this or pivot. Like do I need to adjust this thing? In that first 2 to 3 year period where things were hard, where you weren't making money, where they, I mean, because it's so easy to look back now and be like, of course I was a genius, right? But in those early stages, right, where you were a younger man with less experience and no horizon before you, how did you know what to do? Because you got to imagine there are a lot of people listening that have been grinding it out for 3 or 4 years and they don't know whether it's product market fit or it's awareness or it's this or that. What what was the mathematics, right? What was the equation you had in your head?
to give you some context, I used to drive when I was 11 years old, and I came from a war zone, and I lived a war, and I, you know, had multiple near-death experiences. So, having said that, when the shit hit the fan in New York City, and we had two suicides in our neighborhood, two people, two jumpers, huh? It was devastating. I said to my staff, okay, we got to prepare, you know, we got to be prepared to do a soup kitchen. This could be 1939, the Great Depression, you know, because we didn't know where the bottom was, right? We didn't know there
Right,
was
for
going to be
sure.
tarp and all this and all that. And I told myself, we're going to shut down the restaurant and we're going to run a 60-seat restaurant, and all of you stay employed, and we're going to go to 3-day shifts. Everybody's taking a 20% pay cut, and we're going to stay and we're going to rebuild one guest at a time and stay the course for as long as we can without, you know, letting go anybody. And that's exactly what we did. And Josh, I'll tell you, everybody rallied. Everybody respected that we were all in this together. You know, it was not, there was no ownership and employee. There was us as an ecosystem. And I was giving people gift certificates where I could to help them because they weren't making enough tips so that they could come eat for free in the restaurant. I mean, we were doing all sorts of things. And what nobody knows is that we were cash flow positive our first year, despite how difficult everything was. And what we ended up doing is we watched the revenue. And for as long as the revenue was going on the uptick, we knew we were going to stay the course. And we told our staff, don't worry about the noise. Don't worry about the fact that people death watched us and they did this to us. Don't worry about any of that. Focus on the guest, focus on the dining room. That is your market. That is your reward. That is where your articles are going to get written inside of your dining room. Don't worry about the noise. Let me worry about this. I carry this responsibility. We focus on the guest. And that's what we did. And we focus on each other, of course. And that's what we did. And all of a sudden, on a weekend in September, I kid you not, we looked at the books. It was 2010, and I have 400 covers on a Saturday night reserved. And I was like, wow, what the hell is going on? Did somebody write something about us? Why are we so busy all of a sudden? And then the next weekend, the same thing, and the next weekend, the same thing. And we went from flat to growing at 30% annually for 5 years consecutive. I know it's which is 150%. So the restaurant ran away from me and I was running after it because it was going up and I wasn't staffed
Sure.
I have a team of 26, 24 managers now. We were six back then. So just imagine how fast things. So it was, but was it dark? Was it hard? Yes, of course. I had promised IRRs to my investors that were completely not achieved, and we were constantly super tight, on cash. We didn't have a credit line because we didn't have credit history. So every little hiccup was like catastrophic because you were like, oh, brace for impact, we're about to crash. That's it, that's the end of the road. And when you're functioning that way, it's very it's very difficult and it's draining. I'm not gonna lie to you. Subsequently, in 2011, my health kind of took a bit of a turn, and I had to learn to step back a bit because I was working 7 days, 15, 17-hour days. I was in the kitchen, all the way through the process. I used to expedite and oversee the floor at the same time with the walkie-talkies, with the management because the space is very big. I mean, it's not like you can go climb up three,
Sure.
But yes, there were some very difficult moments. Hurricane Sandy was another one, the financial crisis. COVID, of course, was a totally different story. I mean, but it's all about perseverance and commitment to your staff and to your guests. I mean,
I mean, it
that's
is. But what I'm hearing is like a commitment to the fundamentals, right?
yes,
Like that's really what I'm hearing is that like, during the darkest of times, you agreed to a business model, and as long as that particular business model as long as it was tracking, you would continue on that path. And I think we'd be having a different conversation if the numbers had penciled out differently. You don't seem like a man to me that's going to continuously do something that doesn't work, which I think is a real lesson for all of us. I talk about it a lot on the show. I think that momentum's like the most powerful thing in the world, in both a really good way and in a really bad way, right?
very
Because
dangerous.
you,
Yes,
for sure, right? Because you're doing something that doesn't work, but it's really hard to change direction, to say, this isn't working. I'm going to go on a new path. You had built a frame around that, right? It's not like when the financial crisis hit, you said, well, we're just going to keep doing exactly what we're doing now. You decided to make an adjustment, really
yes,
scaling down, right? Really scaling down. What you did, in my opinion, was you compressed demand. You said, right,
exactly.
is that if demand is going to diminish, what we are going to do is we're going to diminish the supply to meet the demand, which helped you maintain profitability. And I don't think any of us look at our businesses that way. But again, what you're talking about when you talk about all of these platitudes that you hear, what you're doing is you're applying them to a business model, not a restaurant concept. And I think it's a key differentiator.
You're absolutely right, and this is why I think many of our colleagues have struggled at times. And this is why I'm so stoked for them, for the next generation with AI, is that all of these things right now, the visibility I gave myself can be given to anybody that has talent, and that talent hopefully will shine and bloom in a way that could not have before. It's going to be a great liberator, in my opinion, and I'm really looking forward to it because my time, I'm 55, 56 years old. I'm starting the next chapter and having fun with it. But the new crop that's coming in, I'm super excited for them. They won't have to freak out as much and have all the anxieties that we have because they're going to have visibility we never had.
Sure. Real time P&Ls, any hour of the day.
Exactly. And on demand, like you said. And I think, we have lessons to teach in regards to perseverance, character, malleability, stress testing, ideas, and things like that. The rest is going to be taken care of for them, and I'm super, super excited to see what happens in the next 10 years in the industry.
What should we steal from you? What are the tactics, the tools, the strategies that have served you well as a human being, as an entrepreneur, as a restaurateur, that we could adopt and would help us?
Oof. Never give up, never surrender. No. Really, if there was one advice I could give you is be genuine. Be genuine, and be intentional. Being intentional is very, very important. And if you're genuine and intentional with your guests and your team and your staff, that takes care of a lot of the noise, the negativity, and it puts it outside of your orbit, so to speak. That's what I look forward to when I am in my business, running the business.